Okay, so this is how, if you can see the image, I'll just illustrate to you how the situation might have been since the 1970s. And when we are talking about Finland, I think the early 1970s is kind of a fair starting point, because it's then when we built this education system that we have now. We abolished all our private schools and grammar schools and formed this unified school system where every child goes to a 9-year comprehensive school that is similar to everybody else. So we didn't have, and we still don't have any private schools, any this type of choice that you have here in your country whatsoever. Okay, and that time we obviously had a big gap in terms of the attainment or achievement of students, and also a huge gap in terms of equity. Because some people had a very good education that went all the way to higher education universities. Many of my friends, when I went to school, had to terminate or end education at the age of 15. So if we were measuring what the 15-year-old Finns in 1970 or early 1970s knew, there was a huge inequity gap there, achievement gap as well.
Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, I was used to almost your first sentence was a kind of throwaway line, which in the British context it would be explosive, which is in 1970 you abolished your private schools. I'm aware of the audience here that there will be people here who will probably even discuss this as a terrible thing. Our education secretary thinks our private schools are the model that should shape all the lesser beings that live beneath it. But I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about the political context of that. Was there a lot of argument? Were there any murders? What happened?
Yeah. Oh, I think it's needless to say that this was one of the hottest topics of this 1970s school reform. And it goes into this context that it took about 20 years right after the war to come up with the legislation in Finland that created this comprehensive school for everybody, that is a similar school for all. And the main idea there was a dream that we had that time, and still probably have, is that every child in Finland must have access to good school. And I think both politicians, but particularly teachers, primary school teachers, understood that by having a kind of a parallel system of education and private schools that were, in many cases, those private schools that we had, they were the elitist grammar schools in Finland that I used to go. I was one of the last age cohort going into these schools. That we cannot achieve this dream of having equal educational opportunity for everybody if we continue to have these private schools. And so what happened was that most of these private schools were merged into the public school system within the municipalities. And of course there was a huge fight for this, and we still have, technically Finland still has about 75 what we call independent schools. In Finnish we call them private schools, but they are not private schools because they are all financed by the public money. But some of these independent schools, the 75 independent schools, are some of those elitist private schools from the 1970s that have been established already in the 19th century. But they wanted to, rather than becoming a part of the public school network, they wanted to keep their identity and remain that how private. But the Finnish law is stipulating now that it's illegal to charge tuition fees for any education that leads to qualification, including higher education, and that's why this question of private schools is a kind of irrelevant. But I think the question of private schools and public schools is very different if we look at the situation 40 years ago than it is now, and probably it's different also that it is in your country today, because we were in a situation where there was a sort of an emergency. I don't know if you feel that you have a sense of emergency in your education system today. Maybe you do, but we had to do this because this was the only choice. And the Finnish, we have one ability in our country that goes before everything else, and it's an ability to build consensus when we are faced with the kind of a necessity. And this was one of these things where the political parties came together and said that, okay, this will be good for the country, let's move on and do this.